Usually it starts in film school, so credit due to anyone who can wait it out, period, but sooner or later every boy wonder auteur finds themselves in one way or another haunted by the specter of Orson Welles and Citizen Kane. The paradox within a paradox, where the celebrated privileged princeling new on the scene, got everything he wanted right off the bat and on reputation and braggadocio alone, and was also the brave outsider who challenged and changed the system, spoke truth to power, and whose resulting production was an incendiary work of brilliance, today frequently called the greatest American film of all time. The film and filmmaker whose existence proves you can roll into Hollywood, declare yourself God's gift to the medium, have your cake, eat it too, and then eat so many more cakes. And no matter how bizarrely your story ends, when people tell your story, they'll always have to admit, God damn it, that son of a bitch sure could eat the hell out of some cake. So if nothing else, props to David Fincher, currently basking in the warm glow of having been displaced as the director whose undeniably smart movies you're most starting to suspect were not nearly as deep as you thought they were in college, for doing a swerve and instead getting mildly obsessive about Citizen Kane's first draft screenplay instead, and the composing thereof by Herman Mankiewicz, as imagined in a screenplay itself first drafted by Fincher's own late father Jack Fincher in the 1990s. A long unmade passion project of understandable personal importance to the director, it now arrives in the form of the latest all-stops pulled-out attempt to conquer the Academy Awards season and thus secure its position as the new de facto home for every film slightly smaller than a blockbuster and or not owned by the Disney Corporation from Netflix, and with its iron sights trained for a kill shot on the hearts and minds of the cinephile voting bloc, not only spinning tales of old-time Hollywood, but doing so in deliberately anachronistic black and white stock, Kane-aping high-contrast shot compositions, Bernard Herrmann-esque melodramatic orchestral music, old-timey rear projection backdrops, and stagey sets populated by punchy old-school throwback elevated acting, in particular big scenery swallowing star turn at the center from Gary Oldman, who has, in Fincher & Son's conception of Mankiewicz, been presented with what may as well be the Golden Corral dinner spread of aged celebrated character actor tics: an overly verbose, alcoholic, risk-addicted, womanizing, yet hopelessly romantic, classic literature quoting, dirty joke telling, self-righteous, self-loathing, working class, yet highly educated, too smart for his own good, boorish asshole, but with a heart of gold, and proceeds to pig out like he just found out overacting was going to be made illegal next week.
Don't flatulate. You're not writing an opera.
But I am writing an opera. Herman Mankiewicz.
Like whatever else you can say about Mank, it is without a doubt the movie to watch if you've gone way too long without seeing Gary Oldman just Gary Oldmaning all over the damn place for a whole goddamn movie. And lucky for Fincher and Netflix that he does, because otherwise the rest of the picture is weirdly not all that good. And the fact that this really kind of sneaks up on you, at least it snuck up on me. The whole production is so handsomely mounted, the cast so impressive and earnest, and the central performances so, well, certainly central. I felt like I was in a certain amount of denial as it started to creep up on me early in the watching that this wasn't working, that Mank was, despite the best of intentions and right the hell up my alley subject matter and aesthetic approach, just not a very good film. At first I shrugged the feeling off, or tried to, as myself, having misidentified the intrusive acknowledgement that the film's, let's say, loose relationship to the facts of its own depicted events and characters. To be clear, Mank is quite possibly one of the most absurdly detached from any semblance of authentic connection to the reality of its subject biographical films to have been released in recent memory, at least to my recollection, by a major studio. Its conception of everything from the timeline of events to even the most basic details about the real Herman Mankiewicz personality, viewpoint, etc., apart from wrote Citizen Kane, enjoyed alcohol, was so wrong-headed and ahistorical I was fully expecting some kind of unreliable narrator twist was incoming for a full half the movie until it was clear this wasn't to be the case. And let me be perfectly clear, while I'm sure there'll be plenty of people bothered by this, I'm not one of them. Historical accuracy is not an automatic mark of quality filmmaking any more than lack thereof is a demerit, though it certainly is a curious choice that the built-in audience for a film like this is rather narrowly confined to those most inclined to already know the details and players firsthand and thus be jarred out of the story by constantly having their inner fact-checker going, wait, no he wasn't. No they didn't. That didn't happen. That's not how that worked.
I have come to return King Arthur to the throne.
It's a history lesson come to life. No, it isn't. It's totally inaccurate. But here come the ninjas.
Oh!
Now, that's not to say the narrative is entirely a fabrication, or that the story it chooses to tell wouldn't have demanded some measure of speculation no matter what. Its framing device is grounded mostly in the known facts of Kane's writing, from Mankiewicz' end in the broadest strokes. While recovering with the aid of a specially hired nurse/secretary from a violent car crash, Mank, at a particularly low point of his once celebrated Hollywood screenwriting and journalism career, is conscripted by the enigmatic Orson Welles to assemble the first draft of what will become Citizen Kane, with this version of the telling favoring the lately more out of favor than in Pauline Kael view of history, i.e. that Mankiewicz crafted the overwhelming bulk of Kane himself, that Welles merely polished and then added a few flourishes in the shooting, and thusly Mank was justified in demanding a change to their original agreed-upon contract to receive full-screen credit. In any case, as with Kane itself, Fincher's film is structured partly as a non-linear mystery gradually revealed via flashbacks, as more and more associates, friends, and collaborators come to realize that Mank's script is an obvious names-change takedown of still-powerful media tycoon William Randolph Hearst, here played with suitably Luciferian glower by Charles Dance, with whom Mank once enjoyed something like a collegial friendship, but which has clearly soured by this point. Everyone wants to know why he's decided to antagonize such a still powerful person, both in the "are you crazy, he will end you" sense, and the "what exactly did he do to piss you off in the first place" sense. It's that second one with which Mank teases its audience the promise of a daring new perspective, the bright shiny object it's bringing to the discourse beyond the well-worn argument over Kane's true screenplay authorship. Not only does it think Mankiewicz was the real brain behind the film, it has a hot new theory as to why he pulled the trigger at all, and also a handful of red herrings and false starts to wade through since, well, maybe Fincher thought we'd forget which movie he was alluding to. Did he resent that Hearst didn't do more to agitate against the Third Reich? Was he secretly in love with Amanda Seyfried as Hearst's much younger actress wife Marion Davies? Did he simply fall out of favor with a rich man who tired of having a famous wit as part of his celebrity entourage? Maybe a little of all three, but the Finchers instead offer up a wholly alternate theory of their own, one which yanks the narrative into the realm of topicality and also rather completely off the rails, and here requires, I suppose, something like the spoiler warning, maybe. Essentially positing that Mankiewicz was enraged by author and socialist gubernatorial candidate Upton Sinclair's defeat in the 1934 California governor's race, which he believed was owed to propaganda ads paid for by Hearst and directed by a friend of Mank's, who later kills himself out of guilt, a tactic, the production of the films, which Mankiewicz believes he accidentally gave MGM Studios the idea to produce while making a joke.
Message!
No, really, that's what we're going with here. Mank deserves the credit for Citizen Kane, because Citizen Kane, being a names change dressing down of the life and misdeeds of Hearst, was actually an elaborate form of revenge against Hearst by Mank, and also an attempt to rid himself of the guilt for his own unwitting complicity in the wronging of the OG Bernie Sanders and the invention of fake news. Holy shit. Again, the fact that as history this is complete, hilarious hogwash. Mankiewicz was a conservative, virulently anti-union isolationist with zero known connection or interest in the Sinclair campaign one way or another, and while MGM propaganda newsreels existed, he had nothing to do with them, and the suicidal director as a fictional character isn't the issue. In fact, as historical flights of fancy go, what if Citizen Kane had another secret, serious, personal vendetta thing going on in the subtext beyond just an old crank and a young smartass teaming up to tear down an oligarch is a compelling as hell pitch. I mean, most of the shit in Amadeus was made up, and that was great, but while Jack Fincher clearly believed he'd found a rich vein to tap, and David Fincher clearly has followed it through with sincere devotion, whatever they saw here, I'm not seeing. The classic Hollywood vignettes and background history bullet points are serviceable if unmemorable outside of Oldman's big showy all emotions coming from the nasopharynx bluster scenes, but then the big topical mic drop hits, and even if you're not yanked out of the story by the realization of, yep, we're doing that thing where this movie about old-timey days is actually about stuff going on right now, can you tell blunt force message movie stuff, the fact is, the way the narrative contorts around it just never really coalesces back together into anything coherent. We eventually understand why Mank was mad at Hearst, but not why there was an eventually in that sentence, why we had to learn this information piecemeal and out of order other than to aesthetically mimic Citizen Kane, which only serves to highlight that in spite of the film's insistences, Citizen Kane's storyline, even the election part, doesn't seem to have anything to do with what Mank the movie thinks Mank its main character was so focused on. There's no real connective tissue between the parts we're meant to already know, the parts playing out in the narrative present, and the supposed mystery behind both, and unlike its main point of cinematic reference, it never reaches a moment where the answer can be dropped in front of us so we can finally say, oh, that's what Rosebud was, even if we still disagree as to what it meant. Oldman is good, Amanda Seyfried I like a lot, the cinematography is sharp, Fincher obviously carries off what he intended in making the film look and play like an old-fashioned movie without going cheesy, but for something that claims to be telling us the truth behind old Hollywood, it doesn't seem to be saying anything new that you haven't seen in 1,000 films, covering this same ground over and over again. And yeah, maybe anyone trying to tell you that they've got something new to say within Citizen Kane is tilting at a windmill, but this definitely doesn't get there. So 5 out of 10, yeah, this one just didn't do it for me, folks. Sorry.